We are recording. All right, everybody. We are here with our political podcast. I got Daryl and Chuck. And today we're going to talk about the election. We're going to talk about Trump and Biden, as you can imagine, and just some of the questions that have been circulating throughout some of my Facebook groups, and a lot of questions that have been thrown at me about Trump. And I kind of just want to go through the thought process, and I'm interested in what Daryl and Chuck have to say about some of these sort of more general topics. I know Chuck was just saying this. We've had this conversation about Trump 40,000 times over the past 8 years, and I'm sick of it too. And that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to have this podcast, because one of the things that keeps happening to me, especially from the center-right people in my political group, is people keep asking me to have these like intricate conversations about Trump. And my problem is that they don't matter. There's no conversation you're going to ever have with me to persuade me in any way to vote for him for very obvious reasons. And if you're, I can respect positions that are, I'm not going to vote for Biden either. I get that, but it's tough. Trump is just a tough pill for me to swallow, and I just find it to be a pointless conversation. But what I kind of wanted to do was throw this over to Chuck and then to Daryl, and just kind of start off. And I guess what I would ask Chuck, and I kind of, I know what your position is on Trump. I know you think he's kind of asshole, and
I know, yeah.
I know you're not a fan of this.
And the sun is slightly warm too, right?
Right. So let me ask you this, Chuck, because this is a question that constantly comes at me, and I know what my answer is, but and maybe you have a better answer, because I think you probably, in terms of like right-wing Republican issues, you have a better grasp on things than I do. But if you take Trump and you take his first term, right? And if you are able to psychologically detach yourself from all the bullshit he's put us through, just his character and his tweets and all that kind of stuff, and just focus, primarily on those policies, the tax cuts, those kinds of things. I guess my question to you would be, why not ignore all that other stuff and just say, screw it, I'm going to vote for this guy, because at the end of the day, he's going to appoint Gorsuch, who I know you like, and I'm not sure how you feel about Kavanaugh or Barrett, but I'm assuming you like them better than the liberal justices, right?
Well, yeah, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I like them. I like Barrett and Gorsuch, based on what I know, and I don't know probably as much as you do. I vehemently dislike Alito and Thomas. Anyway, so that would be my question to you. And yeah, so
well, yeah, and it's a question that we've all had to ask ourselves, whether, regardless of where you reside on the spectrum, is it's one of those value judgments, or is it worth it? Basically, is it worth the bullshit to get the occasional right-wing policy? And it's because of Trump's personality, one that's very consciously, like it is, very bombastic. I mean, that's part of the brand, so to speak. That makes it even more difficult to separate the policy from the man, because part of his brand is the man, the personality behind it. You get the policies, but you're also going to get this character. And that makes it much harder to separate it. Yes, if you completely divorce yourself from this, personality, then the policies are generally right of center, with notable exceptions. I think he is very much on the wrong side of international trade theory and things like that. He's a lot more protectionist than I would prefer. Certainly not a free market absolutist in that sense. So yeah, it's not all right wing. I mean, he's got some very non-conservative views on particularly international trade and international relations. Yes, I enjoyed the part of his presidency where he, told the UN to go fuck themselves, which I'm all for that. The UN is not a good group. But then again, this supposed right winger was more successful at gun control legislation, or I shouldn't say legislation, wasn't legislation, it was executive orders. He was more successful in stymieing gun rights than was Obama. And Obama was very much in favor of gun control. Trump was the one that tried to take my bump stock. Again, I never turned it in. I still got it. It's upstairs. But yeah, it's so yeah, you can try to divorce yourself and say, okay, but generally, tax cuts, conservative justices, yeah, that's good, but you can't separate them because it is part of the package. And above all things, a president is supposed to be a leader more than anything else. They are leading the most ubiquitous section of the government. The executive branch is about 80%, 85% of what we call the federal government falls under the executive branch. And someone like that is going to be in a position where they have to exert leadership above all. Then your question becomes leadership style and leadership values. What do they value as a leader? And that's where Trump falls, just incredibly short. I've said it before, said it 1,000 times. He's a fascinating character insofar, and I say morbidly fascinating. He has the unique ability to make everything and everyone around him worse. He brings out the worst. He brings out the worst in everybody. That includes foes, that includes friends.
Yeah.
Those who defend him have to bring forth the worst angels of their nature in order to justify him. Those who oppose him go bat guano insane in doing so, and bring out their worst nature. It is like he is a negative multiplier when it comes to there's one of the greatest things you can say about somebody is, I like the effect they have on me. I think I'm a better person when I'm around them. They hold me accountable. They make me want to be a better person. Trump is the absolute polar opposite of that. He is like a black hole of charismatic negativity. And there's got to be something to be said for that. Yes, the Gorsuch was a fine appointment, Kavanaugh and Barrett, okay. But is it worth it? Is it worth your collective soul if you get a tax cut? As much as I love tax cuts and as much as I love the idea of the government taking in fewer public dollars, is the trade-off worth it? And I, a long time ago, decided no, it's not. I'm not going to sacrifice my soul for temporary political gratification.
So let me ask you this, because you used the example of the tax cuts, which I think is a good one, but just kind of stepping back to what you said about the court. Now, I think one of the major arguments people make is the court, right? Because even though the tax cuts are temporary, the court not so much, right? Because you put on somebody like Gorsuch, who's fairly young, Kavanaugh was fairly young, Barrett was fairly young. They're going to vote the same way on things like abortion for eternity, right? Until they're off the court. So in that sense, and as a constitutionalist, which I think you consider yourself, and so you have this. Do you feel like that trade-off, right, where you have a Supreme Court that isn't, I mean, from your perspective, essentially corrupt in their activism, like the left-wing courts of days old, right? So, so is that trade-off worth it? And how would you push back against the arguments that it is?
That's a very good point, because that is a very powerful thing. I said on Trump's last day of office that his judicial appointments are going to be one of his better and certainly longer lasting legacies. In addition to the 3 Supreme Court justices, he came along at a very serendipitous point in history where there were lots of other vacancies in the federal judiciary at the district court levels and whatnot, and he made an awful lot of appointments there. So, and yeah, that's a big argument. I've got a couple of dear friends here in my hometown of Danville, Virginia, that are right of center like me, a constitutionalist, libertarian leaning certainly, who bit their tongue and voted for Trump solely based upon that possibility, his judicial appointments. They saw, and I don't blame them one bit, the executive and the legislative branches will go left and right, and it has, it always has. But the Supreme Court, in particular, and the judiciary in general, changes there are much slower because the vacancies pop up with less frequency. Judges, politicians serve 2, 4, 6 years. Judges serve, for life. And they saw that as a reason to swallow their distaste for Trump and vote for him in 2016. And of course, the fact that he was able to fill 3 spots was certainly vindication. So yes, what you say is, it almost makes it palatable. It really does. I'm not going to lie. But Trump is just so uniquely poisonous for everything. Again, friend and foe alike are worse when they come into Trump's orbit. It is an amazing thing. And if we can keep that poison at bay, I think we're a better nation.
That's a great answer.
I would argue that any conservative president would have made those appointments to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Right. I mean.
Oh, you think so? Bush made some kind of, but yeah, you make a point. Yeah.
Reagan appointed.
I actually made. I understand you. Okay, the first term. The fact that people want him for a second term over a different conservative who would do most of the same, if not more, conservative things. I mean, most opponents would have done more free trade, right? More free market capitalism, that sort of thing. So, and that is a bit concerning. On the judicial side, I would be concerned with 6 liberal judges just as much as I would with 6 conservative judges. Having, I would rather see 5 conservative judges over 6 liberal judges, just because having some differences of opinion, I think in the long run, especially at that level, gets better decisions. And I know the Supreme Court gets a lot of grief, but if you look at a lot of the decisions they've made, I don't know how it's been since Barrett's got in, but a lot of them have been not always on party lines. They've been, more consensus positions, which is what you want for the judiciary. And when you start getting too much, and let's face it, if Trump gets in again and something would happen to one of the liberal judges, he'd put in a 7th conservative judge. He wouldn't put in a middle person. And that would be very bad for any country. You need a healthy opposition and free market of ideas and interpretations and opinions to come up with good decisions, because otherwise
ideally judges wouldn't be political.
Thank you. That's my
ideally that would be the case.
Yeah.
Or they would everyone would pick more moderates, and that would be fine too. But I mean, it'd be nice if the extremes on either side were not there, and you had more people who, some people are going to be originalists, and some people are going to, look at the Constitution and say, well, they didn't know about cell phones back then. We have to read these things. It's a somewhat living document, and you have to figure out, well,
I hear you.
You can't mind read, but you still have to.
Yeah.
And I don't know the answer to that, but I mean, having some people with some differences of opinion on that, in there is going to get some better discussions. I mean, obviously the original founding fathers couldn't think of everything, so you you need to look at these things. But having, if everyone's not on the same page all the time, then you're going to get better decisions.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into the constitutional stuff that we kind of talked about more recently. So in terms of Biden himself, there was something that happened with the student loan stuff. I just wanted to kind of get your perspective on Chuck, because I wanted to make a comparison with him and Trump and honestly other presidents, just to kind of process through it, not necessarily because I'm right or wrong, but I kind of want to process through it with you and Daryl, and just to kind of figure things out here. But so your perspective on the student loan stuff was it was a very brazen or blatant violation, constitutional violation, right? Mm-hmm. And my assumption is because decisions like that need to be made by the legislature and not the president. So let me just ask you this, because when I raised the issue with you online, your response was, well, this was a little bit worse than typical stuff, right? It's not within the parameters of normal violations. Right. And so I guess my question to you would be, how does it differ from, let's say, Obama with the DACA stuff? I mentioned that example when he said, I'm not a king until he became a king. And then, or the Patriot Act, I mean, right? But I guess that's a little different. But, but other stuff that George W. Bush did, et cetera. So maybe you can help me just clarify some of those distinctions and why you felt like this one was particularly egregious.
Yeah, I got a lot of it has to do with again, the precedent, things like that. You can make an argument about the Patriot Act that it's, that's the whole freedom versus security battle, the lines that we'll always be debating as long as we're a free nation. At what point does security infringe upon freedom? Again, we will always be debating that point. The student loan case was the one that galled me, because there was no one of consequence, I should say, who looked at the initial proposals and said, oh, yeah, that's constitutional. No, even those who supported it, Nancy Pelosi and anyone they asked said, no, we can't do that. We simply cannot do that. This is a congressional function. It has to be passed through Congress. This is a separation of powers thing. The Constitution exists and we have to follow it, or else it is pointless. If every corner he was told before, and he did it anyway, and the court shot it down. And then he went back and I don't know the exact act. I can't remember right off the top of my head that he used to justify it, but it was, one of the pandemic acts that he used to justify the student loan relief. And it was just a big, fat middle finger to the Supreme Court, basically saying, okay, I'm going to put it in under this act. Let's see what you do now. And of course, they'll get a chance to. At some point, when you just keep doing that, when you just keep, absolutely brazenly ignoring recent Supreme Court precedent, we need to smack back against that. We're not supposed to, again, checks and balances are a thing, and hopefully it'll work out this time. But damn it, the hell, we're not supposed to just sit back and cross our fingers and hope that the court looks at something that is clearly unconstitutional and says that's unconstitutional. The greater solution is to not consistently do unconstitutional things. At some point, you are hostile to the very concept of the Constitution when you deliberately flaunt it like this. And I think that's where Biden has gone beyond where even Trump went, or even Obama, who, the infamous pen and the phone diktats. Again, there were questions about DACA. There are still questions about DACA vis-a-vis the Constitution. This whole student loan gambit, forgiveness, no. This is, if it happens, which it should not, I don't think, but if it happens, it must come from Congress. This is a purse strings issue. And the Constitution is pretty fucking unambiguous about who controls the purse strings. That is the legislative branch. And if you're just going to, brazenly give the judiciary a thumbs up, a middle finger like this, at some point, we the people got to turn back on that and slap some sanctions. Again, you get some mulligans. I mean, I'm very much of the opinion that for legislators, those who introduce and get passed 3 bills that are later deemed unconstitutional, they should be removed from office immediately. No appeal, nothing. 3 strikes and you're out. When you submit one unconstitutional bill, then that's your warning. Your second, you better be on your damn toes. If you do it a third time, fuck you. Get out of there. You're an enemy.
That seems reasonable.
Daryl, hold on one second.
I think
just want to let you guys know. So I
Okay.
picked the wrong Zoom. I have the upgrade, but I picked
Oh,
the
yeah,
wrong one.
I
I'm
see
gonna
it now.
run out in 7 minutes. So what I'll do is I'll just send you guys another link after. Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Go ahead,
Right.
buddy.
You bet.
Daryl, you're all set.
Okay. So, I mean, I don't know enough about the student loan one, although from what I heard, it is unconstitutional. I think, yeah, in general, the executive power needs to be limited. It's getting worse and will continue. Anything Biden does will be used by the next conservative president to excuse, well, we're gonna one up you, or at least keep up the ante. I think in general, more power is moving in the hands of one person, and for the same reason I said about six justices, one guy is not that smart. A group of people are much better decision makers than one guy. I don't care if he's liberal or conservative, who decides I need to do this, so I'm going to do it. So I think in general, got to move away from that. But this isn't new this isn't just new for Biden. If you look at abortion laws, I mean, how many unconstitutional abortion laws have been passed quite happily by conservative states, or other things that are blatantly unconstitutional? They know they're unconstitutional from the get-go. Unfortunately, this seems to be a popular. It's more about getting votes than it is about caring what the Constitution says. From what I can see, it's like, oh, well, people want this in my area, so yeah, it's going to fail eventually. Let's put it through anyway.
Right.
I mean, my biggest difference right now between Trump and Biden is there are checks and balances right now. And my biggest concern is that Trump's saying, I'm going to get rid of those checks and balances. They got in my way last time. And what happens when you get enough judges who are not just Republican or conservative, but MAGA? They're just loyalists to Trump. What happens when you start getting rid of all the people who said no to Trump when he wanted to overthrow the election? When he, when Barr said, no, we're not sending out the military to take election, voting boxes. That's not going to happen. Well, what happens when the guy who replaces him says, yeah, we're going to do that? Because for damn sure, if Trump sends out the military in 2028, what those results are going to be. They're going to be the same as the Putin election. They're going to say, oh, these things said we won. And I mean, if Trump replaces enough people, and I don't know how possible this is, but there is a much greater concern that it may be possible that he can replace enough people that he just can do what he likes. And no matter how bad Biden is, there are checks and balances that will replace that. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't fix the whole process, right? And shouldn't fight back at every single time, Biden makes a bad decision. Does that mean, it's okay to to vote for Trump, because realistically speaking, who didn't see the 2020 result of Trump denying the election in 2015? I mean, this wasn't. I was watching on the news. I wasn't particularly surprised. I thought there was a little bit. I was kind of surprised they broke into Congress, but everything leading up to it wasn't that much of a surprise. And I was on enough groups with people talking about things going down in Washington. And it's like, yeah. And I saw it happening, going, okay, yeah. Not a big surprise here. Not going to be a surprise. I mean, if Trump loses this election, and I mean, since he is such a divisive person and you need to unite, he might, forget the criminal stuff. He may just lose because enough Republicans are going to go, nah, I'm either going to step out or I might even support Biden. He's still probably going to say, oh no, I won, and not drop it. And there still may be violence in January if he loses.
So, yeah,
that is happening.
Yeah. So this is what I think. I think if Trump wins the election, I don't think it's going to be like martial law, right? I don't think he's going to call out. I don't think that's going to happen. I'm not saying you're saying that either. But what?
Well, no, he did. I'm not saying that it could happen. He did. He asked for the military to go in and seize election boxes in 2020.
Right.
If Barr had allowed that to happen, what do you think those results would have said? Those results from those election boxes would have said, oh, I won. Because the only person who would have been counting them is Trump and the military who took them. I mean, I am saying there would be martial law because he actually asked for it.
Yeah. So this is what I think the most realistic scenario is, and not because Trump wants it or doesn't want it. So what Trump wants or doesn't want is a separate question from what I think would realistically happen. So what I think what is going to realistically happen is Trump is going to be Trump regardless. I share your anxiety. I share your anxiety regarding him appointing people who are not General Mattis, who are not Rex Tillerson, who are not those people, right? Who are more of the people who kind of got those jobs, at least looking at it in hindsight, to protect the country from Trump, which I'm not sure how I feel about that either. But the point is that I think he will appoint more people who are yes men, more MAGA-esque, and I think it's a concern because he's going to try to push some of his crazier ideas and policies, and I do think it's damaging. I think really what the danger of his, but look, I think he kind of goes off. I don't see or foresee a scenario where the military is listening to that. I think it's Trump going off on a tangent, and the difference between and regardless, and I know what you're going to say, but the difference between what Trump says on social